Hello, thanks for joining us. I'm joined by Claire Carlile today, who's going to talk to us about her experience working with clients in local SEO. Claire, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself to start with?
Hello, I'm Claire and I am a chartered marketer and I live in Pembrokeshire in West Wales, and I work with small and medium-sized businesses to help them do better at digital marketing.
Are there any particular industries you work with?
Ones that I like. So hospitality, attractions, some restaurants, but normally the types of businesses that have products or services that I would use.
Okay. Does that help a lot? Does it help to know the industry quite well?
I think so. If it's something that you have experience of, you know, as a consumer, then I think it's easier to market that business, because I've worked in some tricky industries.
Right.
And it's just easier to understand consumer motivations, all sorts of things as a marketer, if basically you're marketing to yourself.
When you're bringing on clients, is there a particular process you go through, or is it really sort of bespoke for depending on the needs?
I think very bespoke, but in terms of really, you know, understanding that business before you speak to them, understanding what they're doing well, what they can do better, what problems they might be looking to solve, knowing the right person to speak to, and having an in. It's important. But those are the main things, and also, you know, demonstrating a real passion for that business.
You mentioned sort of finding out as much as you can before you speak to them. Are there any particular techniques you use to sort of find out what situation they're in, like from an SEO standpoint, before sort of making contact?
Yeah, I've done some, you know, little mini audits beforehand, and also I think, especially because I work with a lot of local businesses that are actually local to me, and then I might understand their marketplace a little bit more by speaking to their customers. Sometimes I'll have knowledge of, you know, that niche and their competitive landscape, and that's quite useful when you go in and you know that market inside out. You know that competitive space inside out, and I think that's quite useful.
So do you find it a lot easier to work with businesses who you know have a good product in the first place, a really quality product or service?
I would only work with those businesses. So I haven't really ever been involved with anyone that doesn't. Right.
Would you say, like, if I suppose it's like easier if you've got great local SEO but not particularly good quality service, that can only get you so far.
Yes.
But if the flip is the reverse is true, then, you know, the potential is much greater.
Yeah, that's how to spot which clients you want to work with.
Right.
I would say, in my experience. And obviously, you know, you can have a client that is weathering a storm in terms of something has happened, or a PR nightmare, or a problem with the service or the product for a period of time, and you can help them through that. But choosing, I think I'm just really lucky choosing to work with businesses and people that I trust and people that I like.
It helps that, and I've got agency experience. I know that if you could have a naturally good rapport with someone when there's not the best news, for example, if there's an algorithm change that suddenly means that their rankings have tanked, and you have to explain, look, this isn't,
sorry,
I've not done this, but, you know, we can act and there are things we can do. It makes it all the, and that's where the education comes in as well. If they understand this stuff. Yeah.
And trust.
Absolutely. And you've both got to work to build that. I think, like, you know, clients have to behave in a certain way in the same respect that local SEOs do and agencies do. When it comes to working with clients and sort of establishing KPIs and establishing expectations, again, is that something that you try and set in quite a formal language, or are do you give people a sort of an idea of what you're hoping to achieve and what you'll be able to deliver?
I think finding out what they're hoping to achieve to start off with, and then we can help them to understand whether or not that's going to be something that is achievable, but also asking why and why and why over again and over again, until you actually really drill down to what it is that they need. What do they actually need?
Money.
What needs money? But how does that? Yeah. How does that money come to them? You know, is it because I want to make more online sales. I want the phone to ring more. I want more people through the door. I want more referrals. What is it that we're actually trying to build? And then, benchmarking that.
How useful are you finding Products Editor in Google My Business at the moment?
This is the way that I'm using it. So, speaking without huge amounts of experience, in terms of I'm not managing 6 million profiles that are using it. I'm using it for the sort of small artisan businesses that I work with. And so it is a way of putting some of your products into the knowledge. Basically what Google knows about you in terms of knowledge about your entity, and you can put them straight into in GMB. So, it is very much for small and medium-sized businesses, because we're not talking about thousands of products. This needs to be, a very carefully curated cross-section. Maybe it's like your evergreen products, because you need to curate this, because you create the collection, the product collection, you populate it with the products, and it needs to be something that isn't, you don't want people to be looking at something that then is out of stock.
So when we think about Google Follow, when we think about local guides, when we think about Google Posts, it all feels like it's a secret social network that's being created that all around the world of local businesses and their customers. Do you think that the end game is sort of creating a bit more of a formalized, centralized place for it all? Or do you think that they're mostly going to just sort of add more and more features until Google Maps is a bit of a sort of hodgepodge of lots of different things?
I think that, I don't know who said social transactional or who first said that or what it actually means, but for me that makes sense in terms of Google ring fencing something in that the Maps app, people might use it for lots of, people might like looking at pictures of things far away, but personally I use the Maps app to navigate and to find things to do locally. So ring fencing that, keeping people in there. Social, because they're adding all these social features. Transactional, because it's transactional for Google, essentially offering a good service and user experience and then monetizing that in some way. Transactional for businesses, because that's how they're going to reach customers, and the customers are going to come and spend money with them. And then keeping it there in Maps, which is all populated by GMB data, which is essentially almost like on a mobile gamification, pressing the buttons, request a quote, click to call, and it's a much nicer user experience potentially than visiting someone's website. So yes, Google want to keep you in Google and want to create that immersive search experience, keeping someone in there. But also that's partly because people have had such awful experiences trying to navigate a local business website on a mobile. So I think there's lots of elements to it.
Almost feels like the only thing that's missing is the interactions between customers. So it feels like, everything is there to allow, if you think about the messaging app in the Google My Business messaging as well, you've got all the hallmarks of a social network between customer and business, but you don't have the community element between customers. So it almost feels like you need this extra level. So if you've got like, I don't know, I can imagine it working really well because like a local pub might have a bunch of regulars that like chatting to each other online, and whereas in the past they might have used like a Facebook group or the Facebook's business page to chat and engage with what the business is sort of posting, it feels like there's a huge opportunity for Google to create mini communities around these much more popular businesses. I think that's all we've got time for.
That's a shame.
Today. It's been great talking to you. It's been a lot of fun. We've covered a lot of bases. I've learned a lot about your business and a lot about Products Editor as well, which I need to go and do my research on. Thanks ever so much for joining us.